The opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Invisible Wounds or Wightman. Please be aware that the content of Fireside Chats with Deborah may contain sensitive subjects such as suicide, grief, violence, PTSD, and other mental health conditions. By discussing these subjects, we will decrease stigma, bring awareness, and hope. If you need support, please reach out to trusted contacts, family, friends, call your doctor, or go to the closest emergency department. Call helplines such as Boots on the Ground at 1-833-677-BOOT. We hope this series helps build self-confidence in you. On today's show, Sandra Mackey, Oshawa Fire Department Chief Communications Officer. What is a critical incident stress support team? This episode of Fireside Chats with Deborah is brought to you by the Ayrshire House in Elora, Ontario. Welcome to the Ayrshire House. Refined and exceptionally welcoming, the Ayrshire House offers first-class accommodations in the historic village of Elora, where the beauty of nature blends seamlessly with the sophisticated small-town charm. The Ayrshire House offers beautifully curated accommodations fronting on the main street of the charming village of Elora. Featuring sophisticated designs and modern amenities, our 9 elegantly furnished guest rooms and suites are housed in 3 properties situated all minutes from the elegant Elora Mill and Spa, and only steps from the historic downtown and its stylish restaurants, upscale boutiques, eclectic art galleries, craft brewery and distillery, and spectacular eco-adventures. Find out more at www.ayrshirehouse.com.
Welcome. I'm happy to see you have joined us today. And what I'd like to do is introduce Sandra Mackey. And Sandra, you've come all the way from Oshawa to be with us today. And I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like you to tell folks what you do, because this is the first time we've had somebody on our shows who actually is involved with CISM, and people won't know what that is.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, Deborah. I'm Sandra Mackey. I'm the Chief Communications Officer with Oshawa Fire. I actually have been in the first responder world since I was 18, which was several years ago. But my whole life has been involved around the support of other people and dealing with first responders, be it police, fire, EMS. I actually came from a background of over 31 years in policing as a 911 communications supervisor. And so we would hear all the different types of calls that could have a really hard impact, not just for first responders that are boots on the ground, but even in the communications division itself. Because a lot of the times when you only get the audio and you don't get any visual, your brain will fill in, right, some of the stories, and usually your brain is negative, so it paints a picture that can be pretty dark. So I've seen firsthand, and why I got involved in critical incident stress management was because I would see brand new recruits come in, and literally I wanted to go up and wipe the milk stain off their upper brow, because they were just so, passionate and enthusiastic about wanting to make a difference. And then very quickly, 5-6 years later, after being exposed to some of the calls that the average person wouldn't be exposed to, I would see them change, not just actually in a physical way, and they became more cynical, and they become hardened. And even for myself, when I first started, I took some pretty hard calls, and what I recognized was that for people who don't have a supportive system in place to take care of themselves, you can become very, very isolated. And then, of course, a lot of the reactions and responses that happen and the body undergoes when it's faced with a critical incident can really take its toll. So I was lucky. I was 18 when I started this career. Some of the calls, and I can certainly talk about them if you'd like, but there were certain ones that really had a difficult and hard impact. And I was lucky I had a mom that was a psychologist, so I would pick up the phone and she would say, "How are you?" And that's all she had to say. Just, "How are you?" And then I would just let it out. And so I recognized very quickly that being able to take it from here and get it out in a supportive environment was really important, just for my mental health. And it allowed me to carry on in a career that I love.
Right.
And so 31 years later, I fast forwarded and I literally retired for one day, and now I've started an entire new career with the fire service. But the situations are very similar.
Yes.
You know, first responders are continuously being exposed to critical incidents. And what I found is, you know, be it fire, be it police, be it EMS, there's a commonality of being able to talk to someone who's walked in those shoes, who can relate to you, because the reality is you don't want to go home to your family and talk about some of the really nasty things. I was very lucky as well, because I ended up marrying another first responder, my husband, and we've been together now for 34 years. So we would talk about our incidents. So I had someone to push it out. So critical incident stress management is a bunch of tools that we use. It's training, and it's very, very structured training. And I can get into that later on, or I can talk about it now, whatever you'd like.
Well, I think maybe right now would be a good idea, because some of the people that will be watching this don't have awareness. And I think you've done a great job in acknowledging the fact that both police and fire and other professions, other first responders, they might have different roles, different you know, flashes that they wear or patches that they wear, but a very similar kind of experiences and the need for support. So maybe you could just talk about a bit more about what you have actually.
So I joined, so when I first started, it was 1989 when I joined with the Durham Regional Police Service. And within the first few years, I had already taken quite a number of really difficult calls. And I watched my peers that I worked with take some pretty nasty stuff. And then again, even the police officers coming in. And back then, there wasn't a whole lot that was established for, you know, outside of just talking to each other. There wasn't really anything that was established. And then a firefighter out of Ajax actually formed the first kind of group, and we called ourselves the Durham Regional Critical Incident Stress Support Team. It's a mouthful, but it's a tri-service peer support team. And so I've been part of it since 1991, and now I've chaired it for the last 4 years. But it's made up of police, it's made up of fire folks, it's made up of paramedics, it's made up of communications 911 folks. We have chaplains on our team, we have crisis canines on our team, and it's also made up of mental health professionals. And no one on our team outside of our mental health professionals even pretends to be anything other than a peer supporter. We're not mental health professionals, but what we are peer supporters that go in, and what we do is 24/7, one-on-one peer support when someone's had a bad incident, or or diffuses, debriefs for large groups. And because we're tri-service, we actually will bring in police, fire, and ambulance that have all been at a scene together. And then after it's over, our team will come in and we'll do a structured debrief. Now the training is actually very, very solid. Every single member on my team, and we're about 35 strong now, but every single member has to go through what's called assisting individuals in crisis training, which is one-on-one peer support, and group intervention, just to be a basic member on the team. This training is accredited through the University of Baltimore, Maryland, and it's through the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. And I've taken a lot of different courses. I want to learn as much as I can about it so that I can support my people. So I've done R2MR, Road to Mental Readiness. I've done Resilient Minds through the CHMC. I've become an instructor, and that's what I did for our team was, because we couldn't send everybody to Baltimore for training, I became an instructor. So I teach the assisting individuals in crisis, and I teach the group, and I teach the advanced, and I teach something called psychological body armor, which is a proactive tools, you know, so that hopefully we can help people build resiliency before they even get exposed to some of that stuff. But our folks have to undergo all this training prior, because I look at it as education, and knowledge is power, but knowledge used inappropriately can also be dangerous, right? So we want to make sure that they have the proper tools. And then we do these structured debriefs and diffuses, and the one-on-one peer support allows for those members to take the information and get it out. We provide education. We provide science behind why critical incident stress management or critical incidents occur, what the body undergoes, what are some common reactions and responses to stress. Because that's the one thing that I've noticed is that, you know, if you don't have a solid support system, and the reality is a lot of people that become first responders, they want to become a first responder so much that they will travel far distances to get on. Some of our new fire recruits, we just hired on 28 new recruits. Some of them have come all the way from Alberta, right? So now here they are in a brand new city, not knowing anyone, and within weeks they could take a call that just devastates them. And who have they got close to them to turn to, right? So the peer support really allows for that bonding of first responders.
So is the peer support team, just so that people understand, they're employed elsewhere?
Right. They're all volunteers,
They're all
100% volunteers.
So how often do you get together?
We get together, our training is a minimum of once a month. We do it with a little bit of education, we debrief the debriefers, and then we do some extra training all the way through, and it's all year long. And members have to commit to a certain amount of trainings per year to keep up their status with the team. But we don't just, I mean, our team is Durham Region Critical Incident Stress Support Team, but the folks on my team are so dedicated and so committed that we've been called out as far as Belleville. We actually went down because there's a World Congress every 2 years in Baltimore, and our team actually got the International Leadership in Crisis Response Award from the ICISF because we sent members down to 9/11 when it occurred. We sent members down to the Peggy's Cove air crash, the Swiss Air, when the Ottawa ice storm came. So although we are kind of a local-based team, if there is a need, we will fill it, right? But what we are trying to do is really get and make first responders both brand new recruits and even the really seasoned ones, because it's a lot of the ones that have had 30 years of cumulative stress, cumulative calls, put them all back here and never ever really had an opportunity to talk about them, that when they come to a debrief, they're absolutely blown away, and then they become our biggest advocates. The ones that say, oh, I don't need that, I don't need that. After they've actually been part of it, they realize, oh my God, where has this been? And I'm so grateful that it's here now, right? Because it is important to understand what your body's going through. I look at it this way. Now, because I know myself, I know what my common reactions are. When I come off a big call and I'm stressed to the max, or I've gone through a whole day of just decision-making after decision-making after decision-making, the last thing I want to do when I walk in my front door is make a decision, right? And I know my brain, I can literally take it off and I want to put it on the seat beside me because my brain just goes for a total dump, right? I can't think about anything. And before I used to think, oh my God, I'm so forgetful. And I would, I'd slam myself internally. And then I realized, no, this is a common reaction to the stress that my body's undergoing because the cortisol level's been released. I've just experienced something that the average person would never experience in their daytime. And my body is going to take 3 to 5 hours before it reaches its norm, right? So I don't want to pick a TV show. My husband will say, what would you like to eat? And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. And it's not that I don't care, but we need to communicate. And if we know this, then we can cut ourselves some slack, right? And that's really important because we have a lot of families that fight because the first responder will come home and they'll be irritable or they don't want to talk, they don't want to talk to anybody for the first little while. And here's their spouse all wanting to, get up in there and they're not ready. Right? So when we educate about what those common reactions are, and we do it for families, we'll bring families in of first responders so that they understand, so they don't feel like that person is pulling away from them. Right. It's just they need a break, right? They need to be able to digest that information. And then, of course, if it's something that's personal, we call that the collision of worlds, right? When something in your personal life, right, bleeds into your, or something the other way around, actually something in your work life bleeds into something in your personal life. We call it the collision of worlds. Because although we try and separate work from personal, the reality is we can't. And when something triggers us that associates itself to, you know, something that's personal. You know, when I first started, I was 18. So we would get calls of elderly people that would, you know, go off into snowbanks and die. And, you know, I'd say, oh, that's too bad. But it really didn't impact me. My mom, when she was in her 80s, all of a sudden those calls, I'd hear a call and I'd be like, oh. And my son, who's 26, we used to get motorcycle accidents, and the thought, and you'd see some of the graphic pictures, unfortunately, you know, we'd share information. And again, I would be, oh, that was a really bad one, right? Until my son got a motorcycle. And then all of a sudden, any call where there was a motorcycle involved, you know, now my anxiety level went up. And that's that collision of worlds, right? So that's where understanding that through the education that we do with peer support, and then it's a bridge to professional care.
If somebody's interested, you said they need training, and with CCSF, there's a number of different courses. I think if you wouldn't mind, just kind of speaking to people who don't have really any information. So say there's a group that doesn't have a peer support at all. First of all, who starts to organize it?
Well, what we've done, okay, and that's actually a really good question. My secondary passion, my first passion is first responders. My secondary passion has always been about supporting them through the critical incident stress. And of course, that's why I've done all the training. So what I do on my secondary time is I will actually go out and do training for different organizations. So I've trained tons of people from the city of Brampton. I actually trained in North Carolina to a group out there internationally. There's a group from Mexico that's reaching out. We can do it remotely. You start with the assisting individuals in crisis. That is your core peer support. And the ICISF, you can go on and they can do training. But what I love about our team is because we are a non-for-profit charitable organization, and because our mandate is about helping other teams build their teams, because that's part of our mandate, is not only providing critical incident stress management, but it's about providing them with the tools to set policies and procedures to build a robust team. So the training itself, the Assisting Individuals in Crisis, is the first core course. And what I really love about it, because I've gone through a bunch of different ones, they use what's known as a SAFER model. It was developed by a doctor by the name of Dr. George Everly and Dr. Mitchell, who was a paramedic. Back in 1974 is when the ICISF first kind of came to fruition, and they created these two models. And so the Mitchell model, which is part of the SAFER, is a tool for first responders. And so it sets the stage for how you would manage or how you would deal with someone who has just been involved in a critical incident and do a one-on-one debrief with them. Because the reality is that for most people, they just want to talk. So a true good peer support session, right, would take about anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes just to allow someone to take it from here and get it out. And 80% of the time, they're doing all the talking, if you're doing it right as a peer support. But the SAFER model allows for you to set the stage. The SAFER actually stands for stabilization, right? Stabilizing, making sure that you're in the right environment, that you have Kleenex, that you have water, that you're not going to be disturbed, right? You're setting that stage. Then the A stands for acknowledging the incident. That's when the person actually gets to, you find out what the incident was that was critical for them, and they talk about it, right? And then the F in the SAFER model stands for facilitation of understanding. So it's going through what are the reactions, what are the responses to stress, right? And normalizing it for them. That's a really big piece. Because a lot of first responders think, I'm losing it. Right. And then they realize, oh my God, I'm not alone. This is normal, and I should be expecting this. You know, and we try, and when I talk about critical incident stress, I think of somebody that's, when you cut your arm, you bleed, you see the bleeding, right? You bandage it. In critical incident management, it's internal, right? So when you've experienced a bad incident, although you don't bleed physically outward, inwardly, you are still experiencing high levels of stress, and your body is changing and you're going through, and in fact, over 260 chemicals are released in your body when you are exposed to a critical incident stress, and this is science. And so it takes 3 to 5 hours for it to pass through your body. If it's not even a personal incident, it's just an incident. If it's personal, it can take anywhere from up to 2 weeks, right? And if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't watch the steps, then that compounds. And those 2 weeks become a month, and it just compounds. So the F stands for allowing you to acknowledge and recognize what those reactions and responses are. And then the E, within that SAFER model itself, is for encouraging effective coping. So in the effective coping, that's where you as the peer supporter, a lot of this has to do with empowerment. So when you're doing a one-on-one, they've already lost control in the sense that the world around them is, it's turned upside down. So as a peer supporter, what we don't want to do is say, you need to go run, you need to do this. What we want to do is empower them to say, what is it you normally do to alleviate your stress and cope that isn't working for you now, right? Because that's what a critical incident is. Right. It doesn't have to be a horrific incident. Whatever it is that a person's normal coping mechanisms are no longer working, right? So what we do as peer supporters is we empower them and say, what do you normally do? And then offer suggestions on how to take it up a notch, right? So if you're someone who likes to walk, then we'll recommend, okay, keep to your routine, go for a walk, but do it at a higher level so that your heart rate goes up, because we know exercise will release endorphins, and that again goes back to the science, which will help take down the level of cortisol. And when we take down the level of cortisol, then those toxins get flushed out faster, right? So we talk about that. And then we also talk about the education piece of eating properly, right? We want to make sure that people recognize that the body will crave comfort food after a critical incident. We know that. So instead of grabbing the burgers and the French fries or the alcohol, because it might make you feel a little bit better in the beginning, but it doesn't. It's not going to. It's going to ruin your REM sleep, and you're not going to sleep. We recommend drink lots of water, because water flushes, right? Eat foods that are fibrous, because fiber flushes. So anything that you can think of, they're going to take those 260 chemicals and flush them out faster, right? So it's about trying to help them get back to their norm. So then the R, yeah. So, and then the last one of the SAFER model, and that's why I like it so much, because it really does follow a nice little pattern. The R stands for referral, right? So that's when you've built up, trust and rapport with a person, their ability to understand then and comply with, hey, this might just be over my ability to cope on my own. And so that is a bridge to referral to professional care. And what I always say to people is, mental health and taking your care of yourself is so vital, and it shouldn't be seen as a weakness ever. It should be seen as a strength. And so my husband, who's an avid fitness buff, he loves exercising. He exercises every day, almost 2 to 3 hours a day. What we've learned, and people are proud, so when you exercise, first responders have to exercise to keep fit, right, to do what they do. And they do it with the knowledge that they have to do this in order to do their jobs effectively. People who want to take it to the next level will even hire themselves a personal trainer, right? And they lose weight, they feel great, and then they go around, what do? They brag about it. They say, hey, I hired myself a personal trainer and I feel phenomenal. I try and put the same mindset of mental health. As a first responder, you know that you are going to be exposing your body to, incidents that are going to impact your mental health. And so just like physical health, that you prepare yourself as a first responder to be fit, be able to lift and pull and run, you need to protect yourself mentally, which means you need to set yourself up in advance with a mental health professional. Take on the same mental attitude of, physically, I would hire myself a personal trainer to be physically fit. Mentally, I am going to go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a mental health professional at least once a month or once every 6 months just to maintain my mental health, right? And you don't want to wait till afterwards. There's nothing worse than being in crisis and you haven't got anything set in place, right? You need to find a good fit. You need to find somebody that you can connect with. The last thing you want to do is go and because not all mental health professionals are great out there. So you need to find someone that's a good fit. So even if you go once every 2 months and just talk about yourself, because the reality is we all have so many outside stressors that are just personal stressors, never mind what you deal with as a first responder and what you see and are exposed to, but just your own personal stressors. Family, elderly people. Who doesn't have someone in their home that doesn't have, or a family member that doesn't have, mental health issues? I have in mine, right? So, my sister suffers from mental health. I dealt with an elderly mother. My dad committed suicide when I was a child. We all have personal stressors, and I'd be very hard pressed to believe anyone doesn't. And yet on top of that, a first responder takes on all the stressors and sees people in the worst day of their lives all the time. So they need more than ever to take care of themselves mentally. Right? I look at it as if you were someone that was walking across a puddle. Right? You walk across a puddle, you can't expect not to get your feet wet, just a little bit. Right? It's the same thing with being exposed to critical incidents. You can't not expect to have something impact you a little bit.
Do you have any difficulties with a team of different professions? I know some CISM teams are strictly like police or strictly fire.
Yeah, no, we're really, really blessed. Our team, like I said, we're tri-service. And I am a huge believer in tri-service teams for a number of reasons. One, I find that it really brings first responders together, right? Because the police joke about the fire joke about the police, and at times when they get onto a scene and it's chaotic, they will tend to blame each other and that type of thing. So when they are brought to a debrief, again, it's a very structured process. So when we do group intervention, we have to go through training to facilitate that group intervention so that it doesn't turn into an operations debrief. Right. It's strictly focused on reactions, responses, and how you feel. And so 99% of the debriefs we do when we try service, actually what happens is they all get to hear about how that incident impacted each other. And it fills in blanks. It fills in the blanks of what went on. And it brings closure. Remember, the communications folk, they never get to get the resolve. Right? When they go to a tri-service debrief, they understand what role the police played. They understand the EMS. And there's calls where that piece of resolve has made the difference. I'll give you 2 examples. One, we did a debrief where there was fire, police, and ambulance involved, and so fire folks, there were literally 2 brand new firefighters. They had less than 3 months on the job. And the call was a terrible call. 3 people died. One of the new firefighters found the body one of the children right at the top of the stairs. And he was sitting there almost just not saying a word. And it wasn't until a police officer who was also there, and you could tell this guy was a seasoned, he probably been on the job 25, 30 years. And he literally just said that was the worst call that in his entire career that he's ever been to. And you could see the physical relief on that firefighter, because that firefighter all of a sudden was like, okay, it's okay for me to feel crappy. Because he didn't know. This was like maybe the second call he'd even been on practically, and certainly wasn't expecting to have that.
Absolutely.
Another example where you get the actual closure, and this was and every time I talk about these incidents, I always get, okay from the folks that were involved. And when we do debriefs, by the way, no note taking, no one knows anything. It is completely 100% confidential. Our team has to be. Everything is built on trust. The moment we breach that trust, our team is dissolved. So when we go in, we never take notes of any kind. Even when we debrief our debriefers, we talk about the incident, we don't talk about the people involved. But there was a call where there was a really horrific accident, car accident, car flipped, 3 people in the vehicle. One was deceased, the other 2 were really in bad condition. And it was in a very small area. It was out east side of, in the Clarington area. And late at night, first responders arrived on scene, police arrived on scene, fire arrived on scene. EMS could only send 1 ambulance because they were busy. It was a Friday night. And they didn't have the support, and the hospital was a small hospital, so The EMS folks, the paramedics, asked the firefighter if he would jump in the back and start doing the CPR. So he did. He was doing CPR. They got the people out and he was doing CPR as they drove to the hospital. Once they got to the hospital, same thing. Staffing was low. And so the firefighter continued to do the CPR as they hooked up the patient and everything within the ER. And I'm not very good when it comes to the technical terms. But anyways, the party did not survive. So fast forward to the debrief. And the debrief ended up happening, actually we try and do it within 72 hours, but it actually didn't happen until 7 days later because of the fact that the firefighters work on a 24-hour basis and we wanted to make it a tri-service debrief. So everybody came together, police, fire, and ambulance, and everybody was talking and talked about their different roles and what they did and what was the worst part for them and just kind of opened up and talked. When it got to that firefighter completely broke down. And he just said, I just can't believe that I was doing it wrong. And he kept saying it over and over again. I can't believe that I was doing it wrong. And so when they finally kind of got it out of what he was talking about, he said when he was in the ER room and he was doing the compressions, he said he looked up at the machine and the machine wasn't even registering. So he was carrying with him all this time the fact that he thought he wasn't doing it right.
He didn't know how to read the machine.
Right. And the paramedic who was at this tri-service debrief said, oh my God, you did nothing wrong. It never, that you could have pushed right down to the ground. It never would have because everything was, compressed. And again, that firefighter was just like, and if he hadn't attended the debrief, if he hadn't been part of that, he could have carried the weight of thinking that he was the one that wasn't doing it right that might have caused that person's life. So the value of debriefing and tri-service, to me, has incredible value.
So it's very interesting because when we first met, and my understanding about your service was tri-service, meaning that the members of the team were from different professions. I did not realize that when you did your debriefings or diffusings that you would do it with different professions, which I think is I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
And it's rather unusual, I think.
Well, it is. Maybe for the ICISF it isn't. They have tri-service teams. They do, and we'll still do one-on-one. If police simply want a police debrief, we'll do that. And what we try and do, because we have a tri-service team, we make sure that there's police peers. Right? When there's a fire call, we make sure that there's fire. If it's a communications involved incident, then we make sure that we have those peers there.
But is it then that if it's a fire call, that it's like two fire that respond to do the debriefing, or however you do it, and your mental health professionals?
So what we have is we have coordinators, and on our team we have, again, our team's about 35 strong. I'm one of the coordinators, and of course I've worked shift work pretty much all my life. So getting the phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's not a hard thing. I can usually go back to sleep afterwards. But what we do is we have it set up through our hospital is the number. So they call our Lake Ridge Health Oshawa, anyone. And the good thing is it doesn't have to be a superintendent. It doesn't have to be a fire chief that can call. It can be any first responder at any time, 24/7. So one responder goes to a call and they've been on a year and they realize that, wow, everybody really had a hard time with that. They can pick up the phone, call the Lake Ridge Health Oshawa and just say, we need the team activated. They make a phone call and we have our rotating coordinators on and we respond within 20 minutes. So we then assess it and we determine whether or not this is just one person needing a one-on-one, right? Or is this a debrief or a diffuse? A debrief is a full structured, bring in, send out the message of tri-service if they want it. The diffuse is a little bit different. Diffuse occurs usually sometimes right after the event. So what we will do is if we know there's a bad call and it's ongoing, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning. So then I send it out and we get 3 or 4 people, wake up, get your gear on, and away we go. And we will be at the fire hall when the fire trucks come in off of the scene. We'll be up at the station where the officers are. And as they come off, it's not as in-depth. It's more just, how are you doing? These are the normal reactions and responses you may or may not experience after the next couple of days. Normalize the incident. So we give them a little bit of education, a little bit of Ritz, we have water and a little bit of snacks, and we give them the opportunity, if they so choose, to be able to talk about it a bit before they just take off, right? Volunteer firefighters in particular can be really, really hard hit because unlike police and unlike full-time, they usually have the opportunity. People are smart. They don't even realize that a lot of times they do their own mini debriefs anyways, right? They get together, they chat about the call. Fire will do it as well. Paramedics, communications don't have that same luxury, because as soon as one call is done, boom, they got another one, and they don't have the ability to break away. Volunteer firefighters, they'll go to a horrific call, and then as soon as the call's over, they're gone home. And on top of that, because they're a volunteer firefighter, usually in a rural area, 70% of the time they even know the people that they're going to, right? So there's always usually a personal attachment to the call that they take home with them. So the need for peer support, to me and to the folks that do it, is so huge. Because the reality is a lot of people, and especially policing, again, 31 years of it, they don't necessarily trust outsiders, right? Or they feel like, even though we do have, and our services are great, they try and give us all the mental health supports that we can. They give us EAP. They have external ones. But sometimes, especially because it's a first responder world, it's a very unique culture. And they don't feel that some of the people that they talk to can really understand, because they've never been exposed to what they've been exposed to, right? So being able to have that bridge of a peer supporter to talk to that truly understands the graphic nature of some of the things that you're part, the audio of what you've heard, right, and how it can stick with you, having that connection with somebody that relates to what you're going through and just sits there and listens, is a bridge to then going and getting the professional care, right, if you're not able to cope and deal with it.
I think the one thing that when you mentioned about rural firefighters is that a lot of them also have to go back to work, and
yep, that's right, to their regular jobs.
Yeah.
That no one has an idea that they were just at a head-on collision with teenagers involved, that one of them taught hockey to, right? And he held the kid as the child bled out. So yeah, and yet they got to go back and do their accounting or do, their construction job or whatever it is that they do, and just carry on as if life is great. So yeah, that part is very true.
And I want to ask you the one thing, when you talk about diffusing and debriefing, and that you also mentioned peer support, and I hear discrepancies between that. So I know that when you take a CISM course, you can take the peer support.
Yeah.
Does that automatically make you a peer supporter, like having one course, or?
No, it's ongoing training. Like I said, our team trains every month. So we compile, we'll do mini debriefs, we'll do mini diffuses. There's constant, when I do training for external folks, we tack on a little bit. So the good part is, again, because we're non-for-profit, there's no taxes involved. We keep our prices way down because it's not a private business. Our team is not about making money, right? Because we're not a business. So we make it affordable for other emergency services. Belleville Fire, Kawartha Fire, we've trained all of their folks so that because again, services, they don't have a whole lot of funding for training. So we make it affordable. We tack on a little bit just for our team, because all my volunteers, they're all volunteers, they don't get paid. So anytime I do training for other organizations, whatever's left over, it actually goes into training for my team members. So they do ongoing, like Guelph. We're going to be going to the conference in October 3rd and 4th, the Invisible Wounds, and I'll be able to send a core group of my team members, because to me it's really important that our members continuously get trained in the field, right? And continuous, because it's like anything. You use it or you lose it. Yeah. And where we lose our members is if they haven't done that ongoing training, because you want to really be able to help somebody, right? So if you don't practice those skills, right, then you start to second guess your own abilities. And what we don't want is for any member to second guess. Again, peer support, most of the time 15 minutes long, and it's literally just being there. Right. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything.
I have a question about the peer support, because I hear, I understand the whole system thing, but I also hear that there's the possibility that there's going to be legislative changes to someone who identifies as a peer supporter. Are you aware of that?
I have not gone, no, I'm not aware of that yet. I do believe that a peer supporter does need to have solid training, though. Yeah. I don't think everyone, again, you have to be a very a person who really knows how to actively listen, right? And part of the training with the assisting individuals in crisis is a core component on paraphrasing, mirroring, understanding what active listening is, right? All of those pieces, because when you are doing peer support, it's about the body language. 55% of how we communicate is through body language. 38% is through tone. Only 7% of how we communicate is through verbal. So as a peer supporter, you really have to understand how to communicate with somebody, and to block out distractions, right? And to allow them to be able to take it from here and out, right? So, and again, the other part that's really important as a peer supporter is understanding that you're not a professional, you're not a mental health professional, right? So we really make sure that we don't push or say you need to do this, or, you know, it's a matter of having knowledge, of understanding what crisis, how crisis occurs, how it can impact the body, understanding the science behind it, educating people on what normal reactions and responses are, and then being that bridge to professional care. And then also giving them some basic tools. When we do a debrief, because we know what happens physically to the body, what we say to our first responders after every, there are 6 tools that you can, look at that, 5, 6, not good in math. There are 6 major tools, right? The first one is you want to hydrate. You've got to get water in your body. Body's made up of over 60% water. You need to hydrate. And yet first responders will come off and they won't. So we say hydrate, we say eat the fibrous foods. Recognize that the body is going to want to just grab the burger, fries, and a beer. But if you know it, then you have an active choice to do something that's positive, that's going to help flush the chemicals. We tell people, stick to a routine, right? That's an important piece, is sticking to a routine, because your world has been turned upside down. So that's one of our 6 points. Exercise. We tell them after an event, don't just go sit on a couch and vegetate, right? Walk, play basketball, run and play with your kids, take your dog for a walk. Do something that's going to elevate your heart rate, because we want we want those natural endorphins to be released, right? And normalize it. Talk about it, because the more you take it from here and get it out, the easier it is for your norm to come back. So that's what we do as peer supporters, right? And part of our team is our crisis canine. So we also have, not every team has a crisis canine unit. We have 7 dogs on our team. And the dogs, believe it or not, dogs actually really bring a lot of value to our team. We use them in diffuses, we use them in debriefs. They'll do site visits. They'll go around to the different stations, be it police, be it communications, and they take the dogs in. And they actually say that just 10 minutes with a dog and petting a dog will release natural endorphins in your body. What I've learned is a dog is a bridge. So can I give you an example of how I used it? All right. We had, I did a debrief, a one-on-one with one of our officers a few years back. And this officer was seasoned. He was like 30, almost 30 years on, sat down like this and said, okay, fix me. Just like that. And I was like, oh my God, okay. I said, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here just to listen. And if you want to talk, you want to talk. And he goes, well, I don't believe in this stuff. You know, this is kumbaya stuff. And I said, well, you know what? You're on duty right now. We got time. You don't have to go back on the road. So why don't we just talk? And you can just, you know, so he sat there for a minute, and with me was another peer supporter who was a canine handler, and she had her dog. And so the dogs are very in tune with feelings, right? They actually sense things. So the dog, she let the dog loose, and the dog came over and sat right beside this gentleman. And you know how dogs lean, right? Well, this dog started leaning, right? He's leaning, and so he starts patting the dog. But he's, at the same time, he's talking to me and he's saying, you know, I really don't buy into this. I've been around the block. I've been on this job for so many years. I've seen so many things. And as he's talking, the dog starts to slide, right? And the dog's sliding down his leg. And now the dog is literally upside down, belly up, paws up like this. And this officer is now stroking the dog's stomach, right? He's on the belly and he's doing this. And the next thing I know, this guy gets up, he stands up, and I'm like, oh, I've lost him, right? Nope. He's taken off his gun belt. He's pulling it all off. He puts his gear on the table. And the next thing I know, he's spooning the dog. And he's lying right beside the dog, and he's just rubbing the dog's belly. And for the next hour and a half, he just told every horrific call that he had ever been on and just went through the whole thing. And he wasn't talking to me. Like, I had pretty much disappeared. He was just talking, and he was just patting this dog. And so that connection with that animal allowed him to open up. I honestly believe if it had just been him and I, it would have been a very short conversation. But that dog allowed him to take and direct it to this. And at the end of it, he turned around, wrote our police chief, and just said, "This is the most important thing that everybody needs to do. I didn't know I needed it until now." But that's how even animals on a crisis team can be advantageous. And we take them out, we take them to, the difference between a therapy dog and a crisis canine is we actually have an evaluator on our team that puts the dogs through different types of exposures of noise and that type of thing. So if we get to a call where there's sirens going and there's cars, the dogs still just go and are quiet and stay by the people and help them through it.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Just that if you're with an organization, make sure that you do try and promote a peer support team. I think it's really important internally. If there's not one internally, then look externally, because there are teams around that will support you. Find a good model to use. Like I said, I like the ICIFS model. I think it's a good structured one. I love the Assisting Individuals in Crisis course because it teaches the core components of active listening. It goes through reactions and responses. It talks about suicide intervention. So that if you ever are with someone who suddenly, lets you know that they are in that much of a dark place, and it talks about how you need to ask the question, how you can't pussyfoot around it. You really have to ask that question, and it gives you the skills to be able to do that. Our team is more than happy to help any team that's out there to facilitate any training if you need it. We have a website. It's www.drcissst, right? Durham Region Critical Incident Stress Support Team.net. And again, our team's all made up of volunteers from police, fire, and ambulance just to help other first responders. But don't think you have to go it alone. Don't think that you're the only one going through it. First responders are exposed to things that the average person never will. You don't see people running into an active shooter call. You don't see people running towards a fire. People of the ability to do this type of role are unique, and they need to have the supports out there, and they need to really connect with other people, and truly, you need to protect your mental health just as you would if you physically injured yourself. It is a true injury, and it's not a weakness. It's a strength to be compassionate, to have empathy, to care about other people, and to do it as a career. I want, and this is why I joined the team, I want for people to be, in a sense, like me, that after 40 some odd years, I still love what I do. I have no intentions on stopping it. I still see the goodness in people, and I'm grateful every day for what I have, for the support that I have, for the family that I have, my own personal family, but also my first responder family. And I thank you for being able to let me share some of this information with people, because I think it's so incredibly vital.
Well, I want to thank you because I'm aware of different teams, and as I said, I'm very surprised the fact that you actually are able to get people who respond to the same call of different professions together, how valuable that is, and the fact that you really reinforce the importance of the training of the members of your team. So thank you very much for making the drive over and sharing this information with folks.
Okay. Absolutely, thank you. Is that over 85% of first responders will experience a critical incident at some point in their career. The Durham Region Critical Incident Stress Support Team is a team that's made up of volunteers of police, fire, EMS, chaplains, mental health professionals, and crisis canine unit.
My name is Jay Bonner. I'm a detective constable with the Durham Regional Police Service, and I've been a police officer for the last 20 years. What attracted me to this organization is the fact that it is 100% made up of volunteers.
Volunteers available 24/7 for peer support, debriefs, defuses, and just somebody to talk to if you need it.
The team was formulated back in 1991, and we know that peer support works. We know that talking about calls, talking about what we've experienced, will help take it from here and get it out.
You're always there for everyone else, but you have to be able to take care of yourself first before you can care for others. It's not necessarily the big calls, the big fires, the big accidents. It's all the little things that build up, and then you don't realize how it is changing you.
No matter how long we've been on the job for, whether it's 1 year or whether it's 20 years, the things that we see, things that we have to do through our job can take its toll on you.
I've been an auxiliary officer for approximately 10 years. And in those 10 years, I have seen things that do stay with you and are very upsetting.
My name is Heather Clark. I've been an auxiliary constable with Durham Regional Police for 2.5 years. And like Sergeant McCullough, we do see things that the average person isn't exposed to.
I can't emphasize enough that the importance of having a peer support group.
I had went to a debrief myself that was put on by this team and got that support from them. I just saw what a wonderful job they did. Both with the debrief, it made the community and family come together to give everyone a sense of the picture of what was going on. Going through something like that, it gives you the full picture and it gives you the closure that you're looking for.
Everybody deals with critical incidents different. Some people experience flashbacks, other people don't experience anything at all. Sometimes it's loss of sleep, withdrawing from the people who are closest to you.
Every critical incident isn't going to be critical for each individual. It's going to be based upon personal experiences. What we want to do as team members is provide them with psychological body armor. Instead of first aid, this is psychological first aid.
I volunteer on the team because I want to do my part to pay emergency services workers for the role they play in keeping us safe. Their mental health is extremely important for them to continue to protect us, and also that they can move to retirement and have a lovely retirement.
We're a support network for all first responders' families, because we know that after a crisis, our families feel it as well.
I'm one of many chaplains that represent the divine. The divine is whatever we bring into the room. It brings people help, it brings them hope in a time of critical stress, and we just sit there and listen mostly and help them along with the things that they're struggling with. The team members mainly, but those on the defuses and the debriefs also.
I've been a mom for about 4 years, and I know that after a bad call, it comes home with me, especially calls that involve kids. So it's important for me to know that it's okay to not be okay, and to know that there's a place for me to reach out when that time comes.
I'm Sue, and this is Daisy. She's my 2-year-old golden retriever, and she is a crisis canine for Durham Region Crisis Intervention Support Team. The stress that we feel and the stress that I've experienced the last 27 years make me realize that peer support is extremely important, and to let them know how you're feeling and how those calls are affecting you. Daisy is just a natural. She brings out the conversation and she reduces the stress. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help reduce that stress for those stressful situations you find yourself in.
People love the dogs. They find them calming. They've been exposed to a lot of trauma. Some of them might be shut down, so to speak, so that they have a hard time participating in diffuse and debrief situations. And the dogs will almost sense that, and they'll go up and pick those people out, sit next to them, just lay their head on their lap or something and just stare at them. And then it's funny, you see that these people, they haven't opened up in how many years, and all of a sudden they just spill the beans. And
This is Clara. She will be 13 in January, and she's been on the team for about 8 years. She is very mellow, so because of her size, she's better as a lap dog to sit on your lap and offer comfort. Feedback is always amazing, always positive. Clara has lots of followers and friends that appreciate what she does, so that's what makes my day.
Kona is a Australian Shepherd Lab mix. She is 3.5 years old, and she was actually new to the team. And research has shown that just petting the dogs during debriefs, defuses, naturally releases endorphins.
And those will help get rid of the cortisol that passes through the body. Cortisol is that stress hormone that nobody wants to have. The average person doesn't run into a fire. You're not going to have the public run towards an active shooter. It takes a very unique person and individual to take that type of stressor and run towards where everyone else is running from. First responders live at a heightened level of adrenaline where the cortisols are off the roof 90% of the time. And what we're doing is we're giving them tools so that they can understand and normalize it. We want to make it so that people in this career have a long career and a long, healthy career.
Hi, my name is Dr. Yelena Chorney. I'm a physician at Homewood Health Center and Chief of Addiction and Trauma Services.
Hi everyone, my name is Carrie Mantanga and I work as the Director of Clinical Operations across our inpatient trauma and addiction services here at Homewood Health Center in Guelph. Today, Yelena and I are so excited to share with you news about changes to our Guardians program at Homewood Health Center. One of the only facilities of its kind in Canada providing inpatient treatment to our first responders, military personnel, and veterans, and uniquely tailored to the mental health needs of these groups. We have some exciting changes to the way the program is delivered that we're going to tell you about today.
For the last 3 years, we've been running the Guardians program, focusing specifically on treating first responders, military members, and veterans with operational stress, or PTSD. And today we're announcing that we are actually expanding this program to be available to those communities and members of those communities who also have standalone depression, anxiety, or substance use without that operational stress or PTSD component. We're really excited to be able to offer treatment to more people in these communities because we know that getting treatment as part of a group of people who understand what you've been through in your life it really helps to make people well. So let's talk a little bit about what to expect when you come to treatment. So when you come to the Guardians program, you'll be with us for 9 weeks. You'll be in a setting on a specific unit with other members of the Guardians program. We do it this way so that you can have a sense of safety and belonging and be able to develop trust in your peers and your team to get the most out of your treatment.
We know that the therapists and the clinical staff here have much to offer you, but we also know about the power of peer connection and how important it is for the voices of other first responders and military personnel to inform your care and for you to inform theirs. There's so much for us to learn from each other.
You'll get most of your treatment in a group setting with your peers, as Carrie mentioned, but you will also get weekly individual therapy so that you can have the opportunity to dive into the issues that are important to you in a setting that feels very safe and where you can build that relationship with your therapist.
The therapeutic approaches that we use here in the Guardians program at Homewood are all evidence-based, and they really help folks to look at the beliefs they have about the things that have happened in their life, whether they're related to their work or whether they're other parts of their life, to look at those beliefs, to challenge them, to think about them more critically, and to make change that impacts not only how we think, but how we feel about ourselves, about our lives, about our jobs, and our place in the world.
When you come to the Guardians program, you'll receive care from a whole group of people who are there to help you on your journey. This includes medical professionals like physicians and nurses, and other professionals like therapists, social workers, psychologists, and occupational therapists.
We know that learning to tolerate and to cope in safe and healthy ways with overwhelming emotions is a really important part of the treatment process. So is cultivating mindfulness and developing the skills we need to be in relationship with other people in a way that's effective and compassionate and meaningful. And those are the kinds of skills that we really focus on teaching and supporting you to develop while you're here, so that those are skills that will go with you into your life and your relationships, your job, all of the places that are important to you outside of the treatment setting. Being in an inpatient treatment setting with other people who are learning and practicing those skills is a unique and important opportunity to really hone the skills before you take them with you back to your bigger life. If you're someone who thinks you might benefit from an intensive, structured, evidence-based program focused on the unique needs of military personnel, first responders, and veterans, please reach out to our intake team to have a conversation.
In Invisible Wounds will host events promoting mental wellness to first responders, their families, and civilians. To find out more, please visit our website at invisible-wounds.ca.